In this video, we're going to look specifically at walls. We're going to use the default architectural template. So we click New, select Architectural Template. We'll jump right in. We select the Wall tool from the Architecture tab, and we notice that the Options bar is populated with several options related to what defines a wall. So we have the ability to set the height of the wall, how high it specifically is, and whether it's parametrically connected to a level or is it unconnected and goes up a specific height. We can also set the location line of a wall. So are we drawing this wall based on its center line, its finish face, exterior or interior? Are we drawing a chain of walls so that we can just pick multiple lines and have a wall or several segments of walls drawn? And the points that we pick on the screen, will the wall be offset relative to those points? We also have several options in the Properties palette while the Wall tool is active. Notice that the base offset is set to the level that the view is relative to, and 0. So the bottom of the wall essentially is aligned with the floor. And then some of the values that we saw on the options bar are actually repeated here in the Properties palette. So this is a comprehensive overview of the properties, whereas the options bar lists the most often used. So we can just pick a point on the screen and see a wall drawn. If we hit escape a couple times, we can select that wall and notice its properties after we've drawn it. We can press the delete key on the keyboard if we want that wall to go away. So select the Wall tool again. We notice the height is 20 feet. We'll set the location line to finish face exterior, and then again we'll pick a point on the screen, and then as we move our cursor around, we notice that we can change the overall length or the angle as we move our cursor. Oftentimes we want a perfectly horizontal or vertical relative to the computer screen wall, and if we get close to the vertical, we'll see a dashed green line show up, and the tooltip there you can see says vertical. So if we click right now with that dashed green line showing up, we'll be assured of getting a perfectly orthogonal wall with the screen. Here we can get a horizontal wall as well. So if we want to draw a wall of a specific length, such as 40 feet, we can move our cursor around and try and get it at 40 feet and then click, and it would likely be accurate. However, it's possible to move the mouse slightly while you're clicking and not get a perfectly 40-foot long wall. But just the time it takes to move the mouse around and get it lined up just right is rather inefficient. So what we can do is just type the length we want. So I haven't picked my second point yet, but I've made sure that I'm snapped to the horizontal and pointing in the correct direction. So now what I'll do is press 4-0 on the keyboard, and because I want 40 feet, all I have to do is hit enter right now. I could type the foot symbol, but it's not necessary because Revit defaults to feet if the inch or foot symbol are not provided. So 4-0 and then enter, and now I have a 40-foot long wall. I could continue to go, seeing as we have the chain command selected. I can point downward, and maybe I want a 38-foot 8 wall, so 38 foot, and I still don't have to put the foot symbol in, but I do have to add a space. So 38 space 8 and then enter gets me a 38-foot 8 long wall. Now another variation on that would be 38-foot 8 and 9/16. So again, I never have to really type the foot or the inch symbol. Revit knows what I want by the fact that I'm putting spaces between the foot, the whole inch, and the fraction of an inch. So I hit enter, And also remember, because we set the location line on the options bar to finish face exterior, all these distances that we're typing are based on the finish face exterior, or the footprint of our building in this case, seeing as we're drawing the outside perimeter of a building. So now I might want a 20-foot wall this way, and now I want to close this off, and I could add the 40-foot and the 38-foot 8 and 9/16 to get this length. Otherwise, I can just move my cursor over near the end point of the adjacent wall, and Revit will automatically pick up that relationship and show me a dashed line. So if I click while I see that dashed line, I know I got it the right length. And then I can also use something called the snaps to snap to a previously drawn element in Revit, and go ahead and click, and now it closed off the footprint. So if I hit escape or press the modify button, that will cancel the current command and unselect everything. Now we'll take a brief look at how we can modify the location of walls once they've been drawn. So when you want to move a wall, you're going to select the wall that you specifically want to move. So we select this wall and we see the temporary dimensions show up. We can simply click on the text for one of the dimensions or the number, and then just type in a new value, say 20, and hit enter. We hit escape to clear that selection. We can select another wall, and sometimes the temporary dimension doesn't point to the thing that we want it to point to, so we can actually drag this grip associated with the witness line and reposition that dimension. If you ever click this symbol below the temporary dimension value, it'll actually turn that temporary dimension into a permanent dimension. So you can leave that permanent dimension, or you can, if we click off of it, we can see that the dimension now is permanent. We can actually select that dimension and press the delete key on the keyboard to make that dimension go away. Another thing to notice is that the temporary dimensions by default actually go to the center of the adjacent walls. By clicking this grip instead of dragging it this time, we can toggle between the three positions on a wall, either the exterior faces or the center line. We'll hit escape to deselect that. The next thing we're going to look at is how we can swap a wall out with a different wall type. Maybe when we started drawing this project, we didn't know what the wall construction was going to be, so we just simply used the default, whatever that was. In this case, we see in the type selector that it was a generic 8-inch wall. Now that we know more specifically what this wall is going to be, we can simply swap it out from the type selector list rather than deleting it and redrawing it. So if we pick a wall from the list, we can see that it got thicker because that wall has more information, has more materials associated with it, and it also got thicker towards the inside. So the additional thickness of a wall is going to grow based on what your original location line was. Now if we ever make a mistake while we're drawing, we can always select the undo command to make that switch back to the original previous state. Now we're going to look at a trick to select all of the exterior walls or any set of walls that are connected by their endpoints. If we hover over a wall, press the tab key, and then click, we've now selected a chain of walls. We have all of the exterior walls selected in this case so that we can quickly switch it. We notice that the wall does not have any detail associated with it at the moment, and that's because the view control bar has the detail level set to coarse. We change that to medium or fine, we'll see additional detail like we see here. The next thing we'll look at is how we can change the top constraint of the wall to be parametric. if we click on the pointing part of this elevation tag, it'll actually bring us to that elevation. Otherwise, we could just double click on the word south in the project browser under elevations to switch to the south elevation. So we see that level 2 is actually 10 feet above level 1. If we go back to our level 1 floor plan and select all the walls, we could do the hover tab click again, or we could just drag a window around all the walls. And now we can change the top constraint rather than being unconnected to go specifically up to level 2. Then we go back to our south elevation and we see that the walls drop down to snap in alignment with level 2. So these walls now have a parametric relationship with this level 2 datum. So if this were to change, say to 14 feet, we can see that all the walls just adjusted to align with that new change. So the tops of the walls are now parametrically tied to the level. Another thing that we should point out as we're talking about walls is the fact that this little flip arrow grip that appears when the wall is selected is always on what Revit considers the exterior side of the wall. So if one wall got drawn in the wrong direction, you can press the flip arrow to change it, and it's flipping it about the location line, so you can see it actually changed the footprint of the building. One way to deal with that would be to temporarily change the location line to wall center line, and now it'll flip it about the center of the wall so the wall doesn't actually move. And then once you got it properly positioned, you could switch it back to finish face exterior. If we take a moment just to look at how this wall is constructed, we could go to Edit Type, Edit Structure, and then notice that there's an exterior side and an interior side, and all of these rows, which are also called layers, make up the construction of this specific wall. Revit has the ability to calculate the R value and the thermal mass values based on the materials that are being used and the thermal properties associated with that material. We'll hit cancel, cancel, get back to our main model here. Next we're going to draw an interior wall. So I'm going to select the same wall tool again, and this time we'll be a little more specific. We want a 4 7/8 inch interior partition. It's a rather standard interior partition for a commercial project. We select Escape, and let's say we want this wall to align with this exterior wall around the corner here. On the Modify tab, we have the ability to select the Align tool, and we click on the wall that we want to not move, and then we click on the face of the wall we want to move. So now we see that the walls are in alignment. Let me undo that for 1 second. Select Align again. So we're going to click the face of the wall we don't want to move first, and then we'll pick the face of the wall we do want to move. And notice directly after we click and use the Align tool, we have this ability to lock that relationship, so that if I locked this and this exterior wall moved, this interior wall would move with it. We won't do that now, we can just ignore that. The other thing we can do, similar to what we did with the exterior walls, is swap this wall out with a different wall type. Let's say we decided that we wanted this to be an 8-inch masonry wall. We can find generic 8-inch masonry in the list and select it, and then here we notice that the wall stayed relative to the center line, which is what this wall was drawn upon, based upon. So we can use the Align tool again, but by default Revit only wants to align to the finish face exterior or interior or the center line. But if we hover over a different line within the wall, we can press the Tab key to get it to find that line. And now we can select this interior CMU wall and get the two walls to align properly. The next thing we're going to look at is how we can edit the profile of a wall in an elevation or a section. So we're going to draw a wall off to the side here. We're going to go to our south elevation view. We'll select that wall and maybe change it to be unconnected and only 10 feet high. So if we want the top of this wall or a portion of it to actually slope, we can do that by selecting the wall, and again in an elevation view or a section we can select edit profile. That switches us into a special mode called a sketch mode. You'll see this with a few other commands in Revit, such as the floor tool or the roof tool. Once you're in this mode, you have the only way you can finish it is by pressing this green check mark to finish it and create something, or clicking the red X to cancel the command altogether, or if we were editing a previously created one, to cancel any changes we're making to it. So you can't hit escape to get out of this command. You have to hit the green check mark or the red X. Alright, so while we're in this sketch mode, we see some line draw tools that we can use here. So we'll click the straight line option, and then we'll just draw the sloped portion of the top of the wall that we want. However, before we click the green check mark to finish this profile, we have to have one simple profile. So we can select the fillet or trim command here and trim this outline so that we end up with just one simple outline with all the corners coming together properly. We see this green dashed line which shows us the original outline of the wall. So we click the green check mark to finish. Up here on the quick access toolbar we can select the 3D view to quickly go to the 3D view, and we notice our wall has been changed three-dimensionally. We can actually press the control key and then press the tab key to toggle between open views. If we select the same wall again, we have a couple options. We could reset the profile, which would undo any changes, and then we can click edit profile again. Maybe we want to add some additional changes to this profile. Here I could draw another outline within the bigger outline to actually put a hole in the wall. So now we have a hole in our wall. Sometimes editing the profiles can make the wall joins in plan, like at intersections, not clean up properly, and you can verify whether the edit profile is causing the problem by resetting the profile and then looking at it in plan, and if that corrects it, then that's part of the problem. If it doesn't, then you can click undo to add your profile back. So we'll select that wall and delete it. We'll double click on level 1 over here in the project browser. The last thing we'll look at is how we can split a wall and make these three walls in this area be a lower element on the building. So on the Modify tab, we're going to select the Split Element tool, and then we're going to move our cursor along this wall until we get over by this interior wall, and then we click. So I hit Modify to cancel the Split Wall command, and now we'll notice we have two walls. It still looks continuous, but we technically have a separate wall here now from this wall below it. So holding down the Control key, I can select these three walls and change their height. So I'm changing the top constraint to unconnected so I can manually type in a height. Let's say we want that to be 10 feet. Now we go to our default 3D view, and we can drag on the disk part of the view cube here to spin around our model, and we see we have a lower portion of the wall now to work with. So there's obviously ways of cleaning up some of these little nuances that we see there with how the walls come together, but we're not going to get into that right now. So this is your brief overview of using the wall tool in Revit.